In this episode, we move from planning on paper to the much harder question of whether continuity arrangements can actually work when people are under stress and normal routines have broken down. Implementing and testing a business continuity plan, BCP, is where an organization proves that its ideas are more than good intentions and more than carefully written language in a formal document. A continuity plan may look complete during a calm review meeting, but the real measure of its value is whether people know their roles, whether alternate processes can be used, whether communications work, and whether critical business activities can continue at an acceptable level during disruption. For a new learner, this topic matters because implementation turns design into operational readiness, and testing turns assumptions into evidence that leaders, auditors, and employees can actually trust. Before we continue, a quick note. This audio course is a companion to our course companion books. The first book is about the exam and provides detailed information on how to pass it best. The second book is a Kindle-only ebook that contains 1,000 flashcards that can be used on your mobile device or Kindle. Check them both out at cyberauthor.me in the Bare Metal Study Guide series. Implementation begins with a simple but often overlooked truth. A plan does not become active just because it has been approved. A BCP must be introduced into the organization in a deliberate way so that the right people understand it, can access it, and are prepared to use it when conditions require. That means the plan has to move beyond the planning team and become part of the organization's operating awareness. Departments need to know which parts apply to them. Leaders need to understand activation authority. Support teams need to know what resources they are expected to provide. And employees need clarity about how work will continue if regular processes are interrupted. A common beginner mistake is to assume that implementation is mostly administrative distribution, but true implementation is a change in readiness. It is the process of embedding continuity expectations into real operations so the organization can respond with coordination rather than confusion when disruption happens. One of the first parts of implementation is establishing ownership and accountability in practical terms, not just in principle. During the design phase, an organization may identify who sponsors the plan and who maintains it, but implementation requires clear operational responsibility for activation, coordination, escalation, communications, and support. People must know not only that the plan exists, but also what they are expected to do before, during, and after a continuity event. This includes identifying primary and backup personnel, clarifying decision authority, confirming contact paths, and making sure the roles described in the plan match the actual organizational structure. If the document assigns responsibilities to positions that no longer exist or assumes decision-makers will always be available, the plan may fail at the very moment it is needed. Good implementation reduces that risk by aligning responsibilities with reality and by making sure continuity roles are visible, accepted, and understood across the parts of the organization that must work together during a disruption. Another major part of implementation is making the BCP accessible without making it careless or uncontrolled. A continuity plan is only useful if people can find the relevant sections quickly when normal systems are impaired, but access must still be managed because the plan may contain sensitive operational information, internal contacts, recovery priorities, or details about alternate arrangements that should not be openly exposed. This means organizations must think carefully about where the plan is stored, how current versions are distributed, what happens if normal network access is lost, and how teams will reach the information they need if they are displaced from regular work sites. Version control matters here because outdated continuity material can be almost as harmful as no plan at all. If different teams are using different instructions, the response may become fragmented and inconsistent. Proper implementation, therefore, includes controlled distribution, reliable access paths, and a process for keeping the plan current as organizational conditions change over time. Training is where implementation starts becoming real for the people who may have to carry out the plan. Most employees do not need to know every page of the BCP, but they do need enough familiarity to recognize when continuity procedures apply and what is expected from them in those moments. Managers may need more detailed awareness because they often make early decisions about work priorities, staffing, communications, and escalation. Continuity coordinators, technical recovery teams, facilities personnel, and executive leaders may require deeper role-based training because their decisions shape how the wider organization responds. The goal is not to create perfect memory under pressure. The goal is to reduce hesitation, avoid preventable mistakes, and build enough confidence that the first moments of disruption do not become wasted in uncertainty. Training also exposes weak assumptions early, because when people start asking practical questions about alternate work sites, remote access, vendor dependencies, or reporting lines, the organization often discovers gaps that were not obvious during document development. Implementation also requires the organization to align the BCP with real resources, because continuity depends on more than awareness. If the plan assumes alternate facilities, backup equipment, remote work capabilities, redundant communications, or manual workarounds, then those arrangements must actually exist and be maintained. A plan that names an alternate location that is no longer available or assumes personnel have tools they do not really possess is not implemented in any meaningful sense. This is why continuity planning connects so closely with procurement, facilities, technology support, vendor management, and workforce planning. Resources must be available, documented, and ready to support critical functions under adverse conditions. That does not mean every possible contingency must be funded at the highest level, but it does mean the organization must match its continuity promises to actual capabilities. Implementation is therefore a process of turning stated strategies into dependable arrangements that can support essential business activities when ordinary conditions are disrupted. Communication planning becomes especially important once the plan moves into implementation, because disruption often creates uncertainty faster than organizations expect. Employees need to know how they will receive instructions. Managers need to know how status reporting will happen. Leadership needs reliable channels for decision support, and customers or partners may need consistent external messaging if services are affected. Implementation means validating those channels in advance and making sure communication methods do not depend entirely on a single fragile system. If the organization assumes email will always work or assumes staff will always be in one physical location, continuity communications may fail at the exact moment they matter most. This is why many continuity programs define primary and backup communication paths, call trees, notification procedures, and message ownership well before a crisis occurs. The communication element of implementation is not just administrative convenience. It is the connective tissue that allows people, teams, and decisions to stay coordinated when normal patterns of work have been interrupted. Once implementation is underway, testing becomes the activity that tells the organization whether readiness is genuine or mostly imagined. Testing is not about trying to create embarrassment or proving that people made mistakes. It is about learning whether the BCP works as intended, whether staff understand their roles, whether dependencies were overlooked, and whether the organization can sustain critical operations at the level it claims. A plan that has never been tested is full of unverified assumptions, even if it appears detailed and professionally written. Testing reveals whether contact information is current, whether alternate processes are realistic, whether communications are timely, and whether the relationship between business priorities and support capabilities actually holds together under pressure. For a beginner, one of the most important lessons here is that continuity maturity comes from repeated validation and adjustment. Confidence should come from evidence, not from optimism or from the appearance of completeness in the document itself. Not every test has to be dramatic or highly technical, and that is useful because organizations often improve most through progressive exercises rather than one large event. Some tests are simple reviews where teams walk through responsibilities and decision points to confirm understanding and identify obvious gaps. Others are discussion-based exercises in which participants respond to a realistic scenario and explain how they would activate the plan, prioritize operations, coordinate resources, and communicate across the organization. More advanced testing may include simulations, partial operational exercises, relocation drills, or coordinated recovery activities that involve both business units and supporting technology teams. The value of these different approaches is that they build readiness in stages. A walkthrough may reveal missing contacts or unclear procedures, while a simulation may reveal problems with escalation, timing, resource availability, or dependencies on outside services. Each kind of exercise helps the organization learn something different, and good continuity programs choose tests that match the maturity, risk profile, and operational needs of the business. A strong test is built around realistic scenarios rather than abstract discussion alone, because continuity challenges become clearer when people must respond to conditions that resemble genuine disruption. A power outage affecting a facility, a ransomware event limiting system access, a regional weather emergency, a sudden vendor failure, or a major staffing shortage can each reveal different parts of the BCP that need attention. The scenario should be believable enough to force practical thinking about timing, roles, communications, dependencies, and business priorities. It should also be designed to test what matters most, not just what is easiest to rehearse. If a test focuses only on routine steps that everyone already understands, the organization may miss deeper weaknesses. Good testing helps people see how decisions unfold, how pressure affects coordination, and where assumptions about alternate processes or resource availability break down. That realism is what makes testing valuable, because it turns continuity planning from a theoretical discussion into an operational learning event. Testing also helps reveal the difference between a documented process and a workable process. A written procedure may state that an alternate team will assume responsibility for a critical task, but a test may show that the alternate team lacks the training, access, or context to perform the work effectively. A plan may state that leaders will communicate rapidly with employees, but an exercise may show that contact details are outdated or message approval paths are too slow. Another plan may assume that a business unit can operate manually for several days, only for testing to reveal that essential records, forms, or approvals are tied too tightly to unavailable systems. These are not failures of testing. They are successes of discovery. Testing is useful precisely because it exposes where the organization's confidence exceeds its actual readiness. For a learner, this is an important mindset shift, because the purpose of a continuity test is not to protect pride. It is to uncover reality early enough that the organization can improve before a real event forces those weaknesses into the open. The results of testing must then be evaluated in a disciplined way, because an exercise that produces no meaningful follow-up does little to improve resilience. After a test, organizations should review what happened, what worked, what was unclear, what broke down, and what corrective actions are needed to strengthen the BCP and the resources that support it. This includes looking at decision-making, timing, communication quality, role clarity, resource sufficiency, third-party coordination, and whether critical business functions could truly continue within acceptable limits. The review should be honest and detailed enough to drive change, not so vague that every exercise produces the same harmless conclusion that the organization performed adequately. Corrective actions may involve revising procedures, retraining staff, updating contact information, obtaining missing resources, adjusting assumptions, or improving coordination with related plans such as incident response or disaster recovery. Testing without evaluation creates activity, but testing with evaluation creates improvement, and continuity programs need improvement far more than they need ceremonial exercise completion. Another important point for beginners is that implementation and testing are not one-time milestones that happen after the plan is written and then disappear from attention. Business environments change constantly, and continuity arrangements that were sensible a year ago may no longer fit the current structure, technology landscape, staffing model, vendor relationships, or geographic footprint of the organization. New applications appear, business priorities shift, mergers happen, facilities close, remote work patterns change, and service dependencies move into new environments. If the BCP is not updated and tested against those new conditions, it gradually becomes less credible no matter how strong it once seemed. This is why mature organizations treat implementation as an ongoing operational responsibility and testing as a repeating cycle of validation. Each test should feed updates, each update should influence training, and each major organizational change should trigger a review of continuity assumptions. Continuity readiness is sustained through maintenance and repetition, not achieved once and then safely forgotten. From an audit perspective, Implementing and testing business continuity plans creates some of the most useful evidence about whether an organization's resilience claims are believable. An auditor will not be satisfied by the mere presence of a plan if there is no evidence that staff were trained, that responsibilities were assigned, that resources were in place, or that exercises were conducted and evaluated. Useful evidence may include training records, plan distribution controls, exercise schedules, test scenarios, participant feedback, after-action reports, issue logs, corrective action tracking, and updates showing that lessons learned were built back into the program. The deeper question is whether the continuity program is active and credible rather than symbolic. If the organization states that critical functions can continue during disruption, auditors will want to see whether testing supports that claim and whether identified gaps are treated seriously. This makes testing especially valuable because it translates continuity from policy language into observable behavior and measurable follow-up, which is exactly the kind of evidence assurance work depends on. Several misconceptions can weaken implementation and testing if they are left unchallenged. One common mistake is assuming that a successful test proves the organization is fully prepared for every future disruption, when in reality, each exercise only samples part of the environment and part of the response. Another mistake is treating continuity testing as a compliance event designed only to satisfy management or auditors instead of as a practical opportunity to strengthen readiness. Some organizations also believe that if the information technology teams can recover systems, then business continuity has been validated, even though the wider business may still struggle with staffing, communications, facilities, manual workarounds, or vendor interruptions. There is also a tendency to keep tests too gentle in order to avoid discomfort, which protects confidence more than it protects resilience. For a serious student, the better view is that implementation and testing are learning disciplines. Their purpose is to improve the organization's ability to continue important work under pressure, not merely to create a reassuring appearance of preparedness. The central idea should feel clear. Implementing and testing business continuity plans is the work that turns continuity from design into dependable organizational behavior. Implementation gives the BCP ownership, visibility, training, access, resources, and alignment with real operations, while testing challenges the plan under realistic conditions so weaknesses can be found and corrected. Together, these activities create the difference between a continuity document that exists and a continuity capability that functions when people truly need it. For someone studying CISA, this topic matters because it brings governance, risk, operations, communication, and assurance into one very practical area of control. It shows that resilience is not proven by confident statements or polished documents, but by preparation that has been operationalized, exercised, reviewed, and improved until the organization can continue its critical work with discipline even when ordinary conditions suddenly disappear.
Thanks for listening. For more audio courses, daily newsletters, and more, please visit baremetalcyber.com.